On Friday, the poem I am about to share with you will be read in thousands, maybe tens of thousands of churches, civic halls, and public spaces to celebrate Juneteenth. This was written by Christina K. Robinson in 1996, and it is entitled, "We Rose." From Africa's heart we rose, already a people, our faces ebon, our bodies lean. We rose, skills of art, life, beauty, and family crushed by forces we knew nothing of. We rose. Survive we must. We did. We rose. We rose to be you. We rose to be me. Above everything expected, we rose. To become the knowledge we never knew, we rose. Dream we did. Act we must. By the mid-1960s, the state of Texas had spent a solid 10 years trying to keep from complying with the Brown v. Board of Education decision of the Supreme Court, which roughly 10 years earlier had decreed that every public school in this nation needed to desegregate. In order to dodge such compliance, Texas, among several other states in the South, created a program they called freedom of choice. According to this plan, officials were very, very confident in every state where this happened, including Texas, that, of course, white parents would choose white schools for their children, and of course, black parents would choose black schools. Easy peasy. What could possibly go wrong? Little Annette Gordon had completed kindergarten and expected to continue her schooling at the Booker T. Washington School in Conroe, Texas, her hometown. Her mother was a teacher at Booker T, as it was known, and it did serve the African American population in Conroe. It was also a school that served children from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. Well, Annette's parents had different ideas. Her father, in particular, Alfred Gordon, did not think it was a good idea for children of such different ages to be educated together in one building. He noted how in schools that were white schools, determined to be for white students, that there was often an elementary school and a middle school and a high school. And he felt this was more appropriate to educate children. And so he and Annette's mother decided to send her to the Anderson School, which was the school that served white children in Conroe, Texas. Her parents also realized that these freedom of choice programs would soon be struck down by the courts, and she'd end up going to a different school anyway. So little Annette got ready to go to a new school in the fall. Now, the things I'm about to share with you, she didn't know at the time, but she writes about them in a beautiful memoir entitled Juneteenth. The young Annette would become Dr. Annette Gordon Brown, a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian, probably the world's foremost expert on the liaison of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, professor at Harvard, and many other honors too numerous to name. As you might expect, a woman of that talent knew as a small girl that she really was very smart. So as she prepared to go to this new school, she didn't worry about her academic success. She was pretty confident that she would see, and she did see her name printed in the honor roll more than more than once. Her great-great-aunt, who lived in Houston and who would not spend the night in Conroe because of the history of racialized violence in the town, wanted to help her great-great-niece in the best way she could. So she went on a shopping spree in Houston's best department stores and bought bags and bags of outfits and dresses for Annette to wear to school. As she writes in the memoir, Annette Gordon Brown, Dr. Brown, Gordon Brown says she had outfits for many, many, many weeks. And so on that first day, her father dropped her off not far from the schools. And as she writes, she integrated Conroe's schools all by herself. Sort of like Ruby Bridges, except there weren't a lot of federal marshals walking me into the school. It turns out that her very savvy parents had negotiated with the school officials, and they had made an arrangement. She would not be on the bus. Her father would drop her off. The parents would not speak to the press. They wouldn't make a big deal out of this event. And in turn, the teachers would make sure, and the officials of the school would make sure, that they treated their daughter, well, like an excellent student, which she was. Annette would find this out later in life. She would also find out that there were multiple threats against her family, but at the time, nobody told her this. They wanted her to feel as strong as possible. And although it was all meant to pass unnoticed, it was noticed. She realized later that this small, perhaps, day made a difference in the dynamics of the town. She also writes that when she first entered through the doors of this all-white school, she would have been, 5 or 6 years old. And she carried on her shoulders the weight of her town's history. That she carried the collective memories of things that had happened in the century since the emancipation of enslaved people in Texas. Roughly 25 years before Annette began school at the Anderson School, a young black man by the name of Bob White had come to Conroe at his mother's behest to help her pick cotton so that there would be more help for the family. Not long after he arrived, this was in 1936, he was accused of rape by a young white housewife whose name was Ruby Cochran. Ruby Cochran could not identify her assailant visually, but she told authorities that she could recognize Bob White's voice. And so he was arrested by the Texas Rangers. He was taken into custody, and every night for as long as it took, the Rangers took him into the woods and beat him without mercy, hoping to obtain a confession. Eventually, they did. Bob White was tried, found guilty, and sentenced to death in the electric chair. Somehow, his case was appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States, and the Supreme Court agreed to take the case. And Dr. Gordon Brown, in her book, says you can imagine the hope that raised, that finally the folks in this town perhaps would see justice in a situation where clearly this young man was not guilty. And sure enough, 4 years after he was arrested, Justice Hugo Black rejected the case, said that the confession that the Rangers had obtained was illegally obtained, and they said this case needs to be retried. And so they sent the case back to Conroe for a retrial, which never occurred. On the first morning, when the trial was meant to begin, Ruby Cochran's husband, whose nickname was Dude, came into the courtroom before proceedings could start and shot Bob White in the head and killed him. Dude Cochran was questioned for a very short period of time, and to the acclamation of his fellow townspeople, he left a free man from that courtroom. He was never tried. He was never held accountable. Dr. Gordon Brown remembers carrying that weight on her 5 or 6-year-old shoulders. And she said, and she writes, "It would take a long time for me or for the town to escape this history." I share this long and horrific story with you because I was struck by her phrase, "to escape this history." I know what it feels like to want to escape the history anywhere, but certainly for those of us who call this country home, it is so difficult to come to grips with our own history, a country we love that doesn't always love us back. My grandfather, you've heard me talk about him many times. My grandfather, my papi, loved this country. It didn't love him back. The time I spent at the border trying to help families who were seeking asylum and during the first Trump administration, speaking to mothers who, weeping, yelled to the soldiers, you can shoot me now, but please let my children." She loved this country. I will never know what happened to her or to her children, but in that moment, they were loaded into a wagon and taken to a detention center, and this country did not love her back. I say this not as an indictment or an inducement to shame or anything else. I say this as an invitation to me and to each one of us to understand that history is complicated, that there can be something to celebrate deeply in the fact that for many of the 250,000 people living in enslavement in Texas, life did change. For many of them, it didn't. Later on, one of the leaders of the so-called Freedmen's Bureau wrote that of all the places in the country, the people of Texas were the most resistant to change. We are all, in our own ways, resistant to change. And as Unitarian Universalists, I share with you a call for the truth, a call to be open-hearted and kind enough to understand that all of this is really messy and hard. And that the better we understand the complexity, the more fully you and I can make the decision that in spite of and alongside with all of these horribly difficult to process moments will not stop us from loving this country until it loves all of us back. Do you hear me? Until it loves all of us back, because that is the promise. At the end of her beautiful book, Dr. Annette Gordon Brown, writes about the fact that many, many, many people ask her, how can you still love Texas? How can you still love this country after everything you've been through? And her response is this: if every object of our love needs to be perfect before we love it, we will never love anything. It's really profound, isn't it? Love isn't just a feeling, love is an action. As the poet Christina K. Robinson said, dream we have, act we must. And so I open my arms to all of you. I open my arms to the history that did not love my family, the history that caused many women in my family to be sterilized because they were inferior, and the country that my papi with a third grade education forced to give his children the education they needed to make a better life, which is why I'm here. Amen, dear ones. Ashe, and blessed be.